listen to basketball games on the radio. And I listened to the Shockers and KU and K-State every time they were on. And the star of that Wichita State team was a gentleman who I didn't know until later had 3 names. I always thought he was Little Joe Stevens, because that's what he was always called. He had another one of those when I was in school, Little Greg Carney. The names were inseparable. But it's very fitting that Joe Stevens became a world-renowned magician later in life, because he was a magician but to basketball. He was a tremendous guard, and again, when it's been as long as it has since Joe played, and his numbers are still up there among the all-time leaders at Wichita State. At the time he completed his career, remember they only played 3 varsity seasons back then, he was the 2nd leading scorer of all time and the all-time leading free throw shooter, and those numbers are still up there prominently on the books. But also, I read something that I found really, something I really agreed with a long time ago. Bill James, the noted baseball historian and a guy who kind of changed the way we look at statistics and so forth, said that certainly one way to value someone's athletic career is how they've been regarded by their contemporaries. And to his point, he had gone back and gone through the Hall of Fame voting in previous decades to see how were players regarded among their contemporaries and their peers. Well, at the time Joe Stevens played in the Missouri Valley Conference, it was at least one of the top 3 or so conferences in the entire nation, the equivalent of an ACC or Big Ten today. And he was 2nd team All-Missouri Valley Conference twice, 1st team All-Missouri Valley Conference the other time. So either 1st or 2nd team in all 3 of his varsity seasons in as good a conference as there was in the country. So obviously, he was one heck of a player. It was a pleasure to finally welcome Joe Stevens to the Shockers Sports.
Yeah. There you go, Joe!
It's the first time the coach ever called me to go into the game and I wasn't ready to go in.
That's too good.
Well, there's 4 entities I'd like to thank for this honor. Of course, the election committee, we know who you are, Weir City. Thank you very much. I got to tell you one thing. When you receive an honor like this, at my age, it is sweeter, truly sweeter. And also, I want to thank those who helped pursue this distinguished honor for me tonight. You know who you are, and I appreciate it. Now, my teammates, I've talked to most all of them for the 3 years that I've played since this was announced, and every one of them asked me, why did it take so long? I said, gee, if you guys would have passed me the ball, it would have been a hell of a lot quicker. And last but not least, the story of East High Pepe Pilots. 1953, 52, 53, there was 2 high schools in Wichita, North and East. 54, Wichita West came in. Well, when I was a senior in North High in 54, East High was our longtime rival for years. Even when Cleo Little played for East, we wanted to beat East. We didn't beat them too often, but those years of the 50s were pretty good for North High. But there was the Pepe Pilot at East High. She was in that pep club. And when I went out my senior year, she said to one of her other Pepe Pilots, is that old man still back? Because my hairline was receding. And she booed me. She was one of those cheerleaders. And this went on until we were freshmen in college. And we were going to a freshman game on a bus. And my good friend Kay Shipley, who's no longer with us, he was sitting by the window. He was on the team bus. And there was 2 girls walking on the sidewalk. he said, "Hey, that's the best looking girl on campus. She's a freshman." And I leaned over and I said, "Hey, you're right." And he said, "I'm going to get a date with her." I said, "I don't blame you." Well, I ran into this freshman girl later on, and I said to her, her name was McMillan, and I said, "Hey, Mac, how about a date? How about going out for a sandwich or a show?" And this is the honest truth. She said to me, "Stevens, are you kidding me? I wouldn't go out with you if you were the last man on earth." So I backed off, and I'd see her in the library. I kept the full court press. And I said, "Hey, when are we going to have a Coke?" I'd see her over at Wilbur Hall, and I'd say, "Aren't you going to go out?" And same excuse. And finally she said, "Okay, but only if we double date." So I got my buddy to get a date, and she had a girlfriend. So we went out on a double date. Well, that relationship grew and grew and grew, and she became a Shocker fan. And in my sophomore and junior and senior year, she was probably the best fan that we had, and I could hear her. "Pass the ball. Slow the ball down. Why did you take that crazy shot?" She was very vocal in the stands. Well, needless to say, we got married. 55 years of marriage, plus the 4 years of going to college together. I want to introduce her tonight, my lovely Peggy Pie, Martha. So the press does work, even off the court. Now, just two memorable stories. Why did I go to Wichita U then, which is Wichita State now? Because when I graduated from North, I had an offer from Kansas State. And Tex Winter was the coach, a very colorful, personal, youthful coach. In fact, I think he's still with the Boston Celtics. And he is famous for the moving offense. He got the Celtics into that years ago, and they're still using it. So Tex was a pretty smart basketball coach. And he had me come up to Manhattan several times. And I leaned towards K-State. The campus, big Hearn Fieldhouse. Gee, what a theater for basketball. Ralph, of course, Miller was recruiting us here. Here he had Paul Scheer and Gary Thompson take me out to dinner and talk about all the pluses, nada. But I was still leaning towards K-State, and I was confused. In high school senior, it's easy to get confused. So I went up to my Uncle Nick Stevens. Some of you know Nick, who's no longer with us. I said, "Uncle Nick, I don't know what to do." He said one thing: "Where are you going to live after college?" I said, "Wichita." "You go to Wichita." He solved it for me real quick. He was right, and I don't regret it at all, staying here in hometown. And the second off-color but fun-colored story, when we used to go on road trips, my avocation then was, hobby was magic. I was always fascinated with the secrets. How do they float that woman? How do they cut her in half? How do you take a guy and put his finger in something and chop off the finger? And, well, you don't, but he thinks it is. And so the fascination grabbed me. So I always stopped at a magic shop in these cities. We went to Peoria, Chicago, Houston, Detroit, and I'd always buy some tricks. And I go back, study them, practice them, then I show them to my teammates. Well, my two teammates I usually roomed with was Don Locke and Don Woodworth. And I could fool them very easily. So we had a lot of fun. There was just one magic trick. I showed them over and over, and they couldn't. They finally pinned me down. I'm sure the two of them on the bed and said, "You're telling us how it works?" I said, "Okay, but you got to promise me one thing. The rest of your life, if anybody ever asks you, if I ask you, who is the greatest magician you ever saw, you have to say Joe Stevens." And they swore to that. And to this day, they've kept that promise. So I want to show you one little magical miracle tonight, with your permission. I went down to the magic shop on Douglas the other day and I bought this illusion just for the show tonight. And this is what they showed me. A big red jumbo dice. So I said to the fella, yeah, it looks great, I'll buy it. How much is it? He said, $97.50. And I said, well, that's pretty expensive. Have you got a carrying case that I can carry this in? Oh yes, the carrying case is inside. Okay. He took the lid off. And inside was a black and white box. He took that out. He put the lid back on. And I'm thinking, how's that little box? He said, no, look. And he shook this box. He pulled it out. And you know, ladies and gentlemen, he was right. This little black and white box was the carrying case. Okay, so I took it home and I got in front of the mirror and it worked. But I had trouble doing it really, so I went back the next, there was no instructions. He forgot to give me the instructions. I was putting it in and putting it out. Little Chinese magician was inside and I said, hey, you forgot to give me the instructions. He said, oh no, instructions inside box. He took it like this. Sure enough, instructions were in Chinese. I never figured out where the hell the red box was. Thank you very much. So, Don Locke,
Yes, sir.
who's the world's greatest magician you ever saw?
You are the greatest.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Now,
Remember, you used to be had to get out on our hands.
yeah, you got down on your hands and knees. And I'll do that too, Mike. I want to thank everybody again. It's an honor to be up here. At 55 years, it is sweeter. And I don't know where, Mike, you got all those statistics, but you had to go deep into the archives, because so far ago. But my coaches in intermediate and high school always taught us, never read your press clippings. Don't listen to the radio, how good you are, because triumph and defeat are both imposters. So you try to do that and you don't worry about getting into a Hall of Fame or honors, blah, blah, blah. But having done it now, I can tell you, it truly is an honor. And I thank you and all the election committee. And I'd like to thank not only all you, but people ask me, what are you doing to keep in shape? Well, my handball buddies are sitting over there. Would you guys just raise your hands, please? Thank you very much. They keep me in shape 2 or 3 times a week to go to the Y and play handball. I'm the oldest. They're the youngest. I don't know why the hell they hit the ball to me every time. I think it's because I'm not as quick as I used to be, but they're great guys and they keep me in shape. And Bob Lutz, where's Bob? Bob, I talked to you on the radio this morning and I made a comment I think needs clarifying. When I said to you, my wife told me last night that with the Shockers being number 5 in the nation, that you are number 5 sports columnist in the nation. I wanted to clarify that. That's what I meant when I told you on the radio. Thank you, Bob. So, thanks again, and if you like my little magical miracle, my name is Joe Stevens. If you didn't, it's David Copperfield.
Again, thank you all. That concludes the evening, but I just want to make one last little announcement for those of you who are our new inductees and will be formally inducted at halftime of tomorrow night's game. Before you leave tomorrow afternoon's game, Larry, please stand just so they can remember who you are. Larry Rankin has some instructions for you about just where you need to be and when and so forth for the halftime ceremony tomorrow. So please, before you leave, see Larry and so you have that clear in your minds. Other than that, thanks again to all of you for coming. We look forward to seeing you tomorrow at the